Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and today we're starting to look at Left 4 Dead. This is a 2008 game, so as of this recording, 13-year-old game uh, that is 4 players, normally in multiplayer, going against hordes and hordes of zombies. This game established a couple of cool concepts, a artificial intelligence engine of some sort, to direct where enemies and items appear, and pushing the general technology as far as audio and spatial audio up. Although, in all fairness, almost no other games really took it as a challenge, even in 2008. There are the occasional good games out there that do have good spatial audio, but most don't. It's still stereo. That puts out a interesting point. Certainly, if we look at the audio, the first cutscene is fairly loud, so I've turned it down, but I imagine when we get in the game we may have to turn the volume up. So theoretically, I could be playing this on headphones because I have headphones, and that's an interesting decision as a video game critic. Should I play the game the way I could play it, or should I play the game the way normal people would play it? And I think of those options, the truth is a lot of people would be watching this YouTube video on their phone, so basically just one speaker. Um, but yeah, I could certainly have the headphones on and have more spatial audio. I don't think that's the way to go, though. I could also certainly move my surround sound system and do a full 7.1 setup, but then that would be so incredibly loud it would feed back into the microphone in general. It's a little interesting that this being a Valve game, a lot of these settings were not established to my taste, not so much in the audio as much as in the video. Like when this started, this was at 4:3 ratio, and a very low ratio at that. And none of the settings were at the right default resolution for my first monitor. Um, there's a film grain amount. We'll have to deal with that. But like none of the anti-aliasing was turned on. Um, none of the anisotropic filtering was turned on. Vertical sync was turned on. For recording purposes, I don't need that turned on. Shader detail, I think, was lower. It'd be very weird for this 13-year-old game to not be able to be handled by my 2080 video card, I believe, that I have. Yeah, I think it's the 2080. Yeah. Um, so you would have liked it to detect that. You would have also certainly liked it, being a Valve game, for somebody to have made it a little bit more obvious that the gamepad settings are here under keyboard and mouse. Certainly, since this is a PC game, and did I mention this was the Game of the Year version of it? So any DLC is also included. It's pretty much the only version you could get on Steam these days. Um, so you have to enable the gamepad by default. Uh, but those small complaints certainly don't even begin to touch upon the bigger issue. And we might as well hit the big issue right up front before we start. Also, I'm going to exit out and show the cutscene when it first launches, because that's pretty much the only story in this game. Since this is a game designed to be replayed over and over again with random groups of multiplayer people, there's considerably little story that happens. You get a generalized plot in each campaign as to what you're trying to do, but there's no real character development or surprising events. It's just group of zombies show up, you get maybe some falling action, which you can recoup and get some health kits and bullets and things like that, and then another group of zombies show up. This game introduces a new idea, certainly, as far as zombies, where zombies originally were the slow walkers in the ghouls, as they were called in Night of the Living Dead, which really established the idea of a Western zombie compared to like a voodoo zombie, um, which is the only time the word zombie was used before then. Uh, and then we had the fast running zombies that eventually got added, I think, in. Um, I don't remember the name of the movie. I think it's the one in the mall, so that might have been Night of the Living Dead 2, 3. Um, 48 hours later, certainly. Uh, but after that, as far as the movie genre, they hadn't really gone any further. Zombies were just undead creatures that could either move slowly or move fast. Left 4 Dead moves it much closer to what a Resident Evil monster would be, where while we will have collections of zombies as we normally know them in the game, there are also very specific mutated versions of zombies that have very specific abilities, and you will get to learn about them as you run into them and fight them, and they tend to be pretty big powerhouse enemies. So, this game, the big issue, came out in 2008. A couple years later, Left 4 Dead 2 came out. And because Valve has painted itself in a corner in which it cannot release anything with the number 3 in it because there's so much hype built up for Half-Life 3, and until they decide to either release a game that says 3, that's just called 3, or a game called Half-Life 3, regardless of how bad it is. Like, honestly, the choice would have been they should have admitted they wasted a decade working on Half-Life 3, and they should have just put out something that was mediocre and said it's done after about 6 years, and said we'll make a Half-Life 4 and just move on from that point. Particularly when you have a game like Left 4 Dead that has the number 4 in the name, and the number 4 there is to indicate that there's 4 players playing along. You would want to see a Left 4 Dead 4, because that would be at least comedic in titling. But they can't do that. They literally can't do that until they deal with the number 3. It's crazy for a company to literally have a pathological problem with a number, but that's where they painted themselves. The other thing they could have certainly done is just said, we're going to cancel the Half-Life series, and we're just not going to finish the story. That would have saved them a ton of time too. 4 years into the quagmire development of Half-Life 3, they could have said, we've just canceled it and we're never going to make a 3. And then that would have left a door for a Left 4 Dead 3. It would have left a door open for Portal 3. It would have opened up any doors for any new games, or a Counter-Strike 3, Counter-Strike Go 3, which they really haven't gone anywhere with that as far as the serialized direction. But what we do have instead of that is a spiritual successor to the Left 4 Dead series called Back 4 Blood, which doesn't really make any sense that it has the number 4 in it, other than the fact that it's a spiritual successor for Left 4 Dead, because it seems like, unlike this game where there really are only 4 characters to select from, and you, I think, have to have one of each character, you can't have duplicates, Back 4 Blood has like 6 characters to pick from. So that would, but it is still the number 4. And the Back 4 Blood is not being published or made really by anybody at Valve. We can certainly get into the bigger issue of Valve has, or at least during this time, had this secret management structure, as it were. They claimed on the outside to be libertarian, where everybody could just do everything they ever wanted to do, and on some level that kind of was true, but on another level, anybody who had secret authority that they didn't even really admit to having could determine whether you get fired or whether you get a bonus based on whether or not a project, based on basically nothing, but it was supposed to be based on whether a project succeeded or not. But they would often kill projects that before they even started. They would often, there's rumors certainly that these secret managers are vindictive and Machiavellian, and will tell people to do certain things that they know will fail or get poor reception. Uh, so it is, from the outside, it is left the appearance that Valve is like a mad king's court, where it's not even Gabe Newell. Gabe Newell is really just a figurehead. It is a collection of other shareholders and upper management of Valve running the show, or not really running the show. And in one way, they kind of don't care because they have Steam, and Steam makes them plenty of money without them having to do any real work. So there's no real way to fix the problem at Valve unless somebody comes in and enforces something closer to a standard management system. As bad as jobs are, as bad as managers can be, a management structure of bosses and subordinates is the way that business gets done, for better or worse. There's definitely arguments for more flat structures, certainly in jobs, and I don't want to get too much into management theory here, but you could certainly be 4 steps away from a CEO, the top tier management, and still have a business that works. But there needs to be associates who have no management requirements at all. That's normal people. There needs to be a boss that typically in a video game structure would be focused on the development of either an entire game or a section of a game. And then there needs to be a management level above the boss that is in charge of different departments of the business. So the chief financial officer, the IT, the chief technical officer, the C-level management. And then there needs to be somebody heading the street, the heading the show, the CEO. And now there's some confusion, certainly, as the idea that the CEO is really above all the other C-level managers, but that depends on who has the shares and who has the votes. But yeah, that's a basic example of you could be 4 steps away from the CEO and be fine. What Valve does makes no sense at all, because theoretically they tell them on day one, they tell employees on day one that everybody's on the same level, that Gabe Newell, the figurehead who also owns several shares and is technically the CEO, is on the same level as the brand new employee that just came up. And that's just not the case at all. That wouldn't even be the case if Valve was some kind of weird, like, union run business where everybody was on the same level and on the union, in the union, and it was just based on seniority as far as who gets benefits or who wins in a tie as far as decisions. Because yeah, even unions, it would be a very weird union run business with no management whatsoever. Why would you have a union if it wasn't negotiating with a management of some sort? But yeah, Valve is a mess as a business. They can't accomplish anything. They've painted themselves into a corner. They need to take bold moves, and they need to get back to making video games. And they proved that, certainly, when they came out with the VR game Half-Life Alyx. That being said, Half-Life Alyx is a VR game, and thus its audience was fairly limited. And certainly it sucks to have to spend potentially 8 minutes explaining the mess at Valve every time you want to play a Valve game. Is there anything else that we need to set up before we jump into the game? It is obviously a zombie game. If you haven't figured that out, I'd be shocked. It's a first person shooter game. It did come on the Orange Box, which the Orange Box, when it came out, established a bold concept, certainly, because it had Counter-Strike Go, it had Left 4 Dead, and it had Portal. They thought Portal would just be a side puzzle game nobody would be interested in, and that Counter-Strike Go would be the main selling point. Whereas there's a lot of niche popularity, certainly with Portal. Portal's one of my favorite games, and definitely a lot of niche popularity for this game. And I think a big part of that is because the Orange Box came to consoles, and I was definitely an Xbox gamer, Xbox 360 gamer at the time. Although I think I actually did play the Orange Box on my PlayStation 3. And there was not really. Maybe Counter-Strike Go. I actually don't think Counter-Strike Go was in the Orange Box. It was Half-Life 2 Episode 1 or Half-Life 2 Episode 2 that was in the Orange Box. And thus, having never been a PC gamer, I'd never played any Half-Life games. I've still, to this day, never played any of the Half-Life games. And the Black Mesa fan-made remake of Half-Life 1 is the only thing that makes a good argument to even begin to try to get into that series. And then you still have the major caveat of, well, even if Black Mesa is great, it doesn't really fix the problem that there's not a finished story there, and every single one of those games in the Half-Life series has left on a pretty big cliffhanger. Half-Life in general is just a generic excuse to be a first-person shooter with interesting source engine physics, which is Valve's custom engine, the source engine. This is made on the source engine. Also, 13 years down the line, Source Engine 2, still not really out of beta. No real games running on the Source Engine 2. So their pride as far as Valve being able to make an engine that would compare to something like the Unreal Engine or the Unity engine has been completely demolished. Very few people would decide to use the Source Engine or Source Engine 2 for their games. I don't believe there's even a good financial reason why you would use the Source Engine at this point. So, Valve fails on two different ways. It would have made a lot more sense if they had been working 13 years on Source Engine 2 and actually succeeded at putting that out instead of making games. But it is kind of a feedback loop. If you're not actually getting the pressure to put out a game, you're not really getting pressure to put out a working version of your first-person shooter engine game. And honestly, its scope and its mentality of having physics engines fell by the wayside as other engines like Unreal also had physics engines. So once that problem was solved, they no longer have a selling point. And we certainly may see that in Left 4 Dead, too, that this game may feel fairly old compared to modern games, because everything that was brand new and ingenious in this game may have been very easily copied over the years and just become standard and rote. But yeah, to get back to the Orange Box, because I had never been a PC gamer, I'd never played Half-Life, so I had no interest in playing Half-Life Episode 1 or 2, whatever was on the Orange Box. And so I never played it. Because I'm not into military first-person shooters, I wouldn't have played Counter-Strike Go if that was in the Orange Box. So I ended up only playing Portal, which was a completely single-player game, and then playing Left 4 Dead online, which... it was fine in its heyday. I doubt there will be too many new people playing Left 4 Dead 1 at this point. So any old game, even like 6 months to a year old, trying to play online is a very different experience, or at least it has the potential to be a very different experience, because I could get online with a lot of people. they want to chat and I don't want to chat. Certainly, I've turned off those settings. Or a lot of people that are going to get very frustrated with me in the fact that I haven't gotten good, as it were, and been playing this game for an extremely long time. Okay, so that was about the setup, and I knew I was going to go long, so let's go ahead and relaunch it and watch the cutscene. It'll be a little loud. This game does have some of the Steam features as far as remote play together and controller support, Steam Link support, although Steam Link is a dead... well, the Steam controller is dead. Steam Link still kind of works, where you could stream the game somewhere else. Graphics here don't look terrible when you get all the settings up. They are slightly low polygon,
seen anything like this
but
before.
only extremely slightly.
Smeared it all over yourself.
Of course, this also would be a pre-rendered cutscene, so
They're changing.
God damn it, Bill! Oh, it stinks.
the actual game itself may look a little different. This game is very much about the audio, so I may play a lot of this not talking that much. So you have the military guy, you have the girl who is, I think, supposed to be a runner.
Hello?
Hello? And then you have two other people. The military guy has an automatic rifle. She has two handheld guns. But everybody switches guns. You have the businessman with the smaller machine gun, and then you have the you have the more biker guy with the shotgun. This is showing the different kind of mutations, and kind of showing that it took 2 weeks for these mutations to start showing up.
Merry Christmas.
Nobody is really a class so much. Like, everybody has healing kits. Everybody has these handmade grenades. Everybody can pretty much pick up all the same weapons. Yeah, I think everybody can pick up the same weapons. So the classes are definitely more around the enemies, which is an interesting twist, certainly, to have
This is gonna get bad.
several different classes of zombies, but it's not that unique, frankly, for any other kind of games. Where any kind of RPG, you'd be fighting low-level rats, bears, like werewolves, vampires. Like the number of different classes of enemies in a Witcher game, or even a standard just RPG, is still way higher than this game has. That being said, this would be a very different kind of game if they had not really tried to polish each mutant class as much as they did, and instead they just had a whole bunch of variety. For instance, hulking zombie here. If there was a red version of him and a green version of him, and old red meant is that he had more life, and old green meant is that he did more damage, that'd be fairly annoying. And it probably wouldn't work because I suspect the AI director is cheating. I think I have heard that the AI director cheats a lot in this game. It hides the health,
We just crossed the street.
or makes it so you do more
Let's not throw a
damage with
party and
your
we're out
last
of the
bullet.
city.
Which a lot of games certainly do that, where they will secretly have your last bullet do a lot more damage than your first bullets, or they'll make it much more of a desperate scenario. And that's a good thing, because in a lot of ways, video games, particularly video games like this, are interactive movies, so cheating and scripting events is not that bad. On the other hand, you could probably make an argument that a lot of what the AI director is doing is just rolling a random number generator to determine whether or not it's going to put an enemy or not, or running against a very simplistic script based on did you take damage in your last fight or not. Playing in single player with an AI director is going to definitely be something more custom of an experience versus playing in a group. There's a whole bunch of achievements here, but I am not sure that all of the achievements, which does not actually work with the controller as far as scrolling up and down, as far as I can tell. Like, I'm not seeing D-pad moves it up and down. I'm not sure if you really could get all of these achievements on single player only, but killing 53,596 infected is a fairly high number. There is a point to mention that there's the first mutated, the crying lady, crying zombie in that cutscene is called the Witch. They now have a new character in Back 4 Blood called the Snitch. It is probably a little unacceptable to be calling anything that even remotely appears to have once been a human female witch. Although, I don't think there's a lot of room for complaint here. Apparently there is a survival mode feature that we probably won't play. This game definitely has a situation where I am just not certain how much of this I'd really want to play. Whether I want to just go through each campaign once, or whether I want to go through each campaign twice, with the second time having the developer commentary on it or not. I know in the levels there are some places where the walls might be slightly... This is actually glitched. See where it says outbreak and then last stand, and then I'm pressing down and then it moves outbreak and last stand back down. So I've been pressing down this whole time and not really making any progress. That's weird. But yeah, we do have a developer commentary. There certainly are add-ons you could get. I don't think there's a real reason for that I would play the add-ons though, because that at that point the add-ons are probably not even made by the developers of the game. Alright, so as this is set up, I need to decide a couple things. We could change the difficulty all the way down to expert, and that's for the most survivor experience, or advanced for experienced players, which would technically include me, or we can leave it at normal, or we could go down the easy. I think we'll leave it at normal. The campaigns that exist are No Mercy, Crash Course, Death Toll, Dead Air, Blood Harvest, and The Sacrifice. And while most of these campaigns are theoretically the same actors playing different plays, and so you can see that this says make your way to Mercy Hospital for a rooftop rescue, where the other one says make your way through the alleys and to the truck depot. get to the small town of Riverside for waterfront rescue, get to the runway of the metro airport for an airlift rescue, find a rural holdout being used by the military to rescue survivors, and find a sailboat and sail away to safety. That's not indicating that like each of these scenarios are happening in a chronological linear timeline. The main four characters aren't going to make it to Mercy Hospital, get rescued, then get shot down, and have to be rescued a second time, and then a third time, and a fourth time, and a fifth time, and a sixth time. If you were making something that was closer to the Walking Dead Telltale series, that would be the point, certainly, in the way it would work. After each campaign, we can see there are specific chapters. So theoretically, we'll try to do a chapter or two in each of these sections, but chapters seem to be fairly inconsistent in length because most expansions have 4 or 5 chapters, but the last one has only 3, and Crash Course only has 2. And we could pick any character we want to play as, or we could just leave it as random. There is an argument here, certainly, as we're picking in single player, to play as Zoe. Why play as Zoe? Because she has a red coat. And if you were to play, say, as Francis, his black jacket would be in the dark a lot. This is a fairly dark game. If you play as Lewis, his white shirt might work fairly well. If you play as Bill, you'd be fairly stuck in the dark too. Let's start, I think, with random though, and then we'll pick someone different for each campaign. That way we can hear the lines of dialogue. I suppose it is worth mentioning too that if you need to adjust brightness, do it now. This is the default brightness setting. This is also a pop-up screen. There's a lot of this game that just does not work well with controller setup. So yeah, well, it's a fairly dark game. We may once again have to adjust the audio. Multiplayer we won't play. Steam Cloud stores your gameplay experience across PCs. This game has been ported to a lot of things, certainly. And yeah, I guess 30 minutes in, I could either end this whole episode now and start a new one and call this the setup episode or episode 0, or I could start playing. So I think what I'll do is I think we should stop the episode now, because so many times, me personally, I've run into irritating YouTube videos that are just about covering the setup and covering Valve, and we've just spent 30 minutes talking about it. I would rather have the next episode start in the action. So this I guess has been a tease, and hopefully I'll label this video as episode 0. But yeah, that's going to be it for this recording. That way, next recording we can just start with the action. As always, if you appreciate that idea as much as you may have felt teased here, I'd ask you to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You know, help my YouTube channel. Friend and follow me so you can get notifications. And there's a bunch of links down below in the description to friend and follow. And if you want to support me even further, there's a Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.